So we are now recording. So welcome again to our second session of discussing difficult topics with our clients. Again, my name is Shari Wall, and hopefully my partner will join us, Megan Concannon. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties with the other sessions. So if she does not join us, it is simply because she literally cannot do that if it will mess up the other accounts. So I just wanted to share that with you guys to let you know. So does anybody have any questions before we begin our second session? Anybody at all? Okay. So just remember that you can please always comment, always go ahead and, share your thoughts with me. Feel free to unmute yourself. I did mute everybody for this, but I'm asking if, when you have a comment, when you have something you'd like to share, please unmute yourself. And I really, like I said before in the last session, the reason why we completed this as a live is so that we can all kind of discuss. So Matthew's asking how many CEU hours this session will be. In total, this session is 0.3 CEUs. So in order to obtain the CEUs for both of these sessions, you have to have watched both sessions, either through virtual or through watching it through the YouTube and submitting the attestation, okay? But we will not be able to give credit if you only view one of the two sessions, if that makes sense. Okay, so let's go ahead and we will begin, okay? I saw this today, actually, this lovely little graphic here, and I wanted to talk about it for a second because I thought it was really important that here we are, we're talking about trauma, and we're talking about how to talk about trauma, and this pops up in my news feed, and it says, your trauma is valid, even if there are others who have it, quote unquote, worse, even if it occurred a long time ago, even if you feel, quote, just fine now, even if it could have been avoided, even if you only you know about it, and even if someone says it isn't a big deal. And I think that right there is super important, because the fact that we're starting to talk about these traumas and we're talking about how important it is to talk about these traumas is a really good sign to me that we're moving forward with helping each other to heal. And especially us as recreation therapists, that's our job, right? We are trying to help our clients heal emotionally, physically, mentally, whatever it is from those domains. This is what we do. So that being said, let's get right into it. We're going to talk about how to implement our groups. Now, if you remember last time, we talked about what trauma is. We talked about what types of traumas and or difficult topics we could be presenting, right? We talked about physiological, psychological, and sexual abuse. We talked about the loss, grief, right? We talked about societal grief with the unrest that's going on in the world, right? And so I think it's important that we talk about literally how to implement our groups. So the first thing, as we know, with those explicit rules, right? Those ground rules, the implicit versus the explicit, we're going to explain those ground rules. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. We're not going to interrupt each other when someone's speaking, right? And sometimes that probably in and of itself, I'm sure you guys know, that's probably one of the more difficult parts of this, right? When everybody has something to add and they want to interrupt. And I'll tell you, I am very guilty of that myself. And it is something that I'm working on mostly every day to try and stop letting myself interrupt others when they have something to say. That being said, I do want to put the caveat that, especially if you've worked in psych, you know that sometimes you have patients that are either manic or they are experiencing symptoms of psychosis, and literally they just go and they go on this journey And sometimes you're gonna have to kind of reel them in. That's what I call it. I'm reeling you back in, and I kind of do like a fishing motion, and I reel them back in because sometimes we've gone all the way to the left field and we want to go to the right. Okay, so again, if it's not the first time we've viewed the movie or read the story or explored the lyrics, we're always going to recap, just like we did right now, right? We talked about the different traumas, we talked about trauma-informed care, and now that I've refreshed your memories, we're going to move forward. We're going to remind them of our characters, of the storyline, of the topics or discussions that they've already covered. And this is because, especially when we're talking about people who might be on meds, or they might be in the mid stages of dementia or whatever it is, sometimes they're not going to remember those little nuances. And it's important to remind them of these nuances because, especially when we're talking about difficult topics, we need to remind them of what these difficult instances have been, okay? So for cinema therapy or bibliotherapy, maybe even having a flip chart or a chalkboard that you write on and you ask the participants to remember, well, where did we leave off, right? When I'm doing a bibliotherapy, I will often write like a little diagram of who the characters are, what are their, character traits, what do we know about them, and what are we thinking that they need to work on. This is an important way to get them back into that mindset, especially if it's a once a week group. So we're going to begin to facilitate our intervention. We're going to stop every 5 to 10 minutes or after or during an important topic. Now, I want to make a little caveat here. When we're doing music and emotions, as we call it in my facility, you can call it music as a therapy, you can call it music and discussion, whatever you call it. We're not going to stop the song in the middle of the song, okay? What we're going to do is we're going to play the song completely through, and then we're going to discuss them. Now, what I've done in the past is hand out the lyrics each song. My intern this semester, she did a really ingenious thing, and she, I gave her the program to run with, and she did. And what she did was each song, she had the patients pick a marker and highlight lyrics that they thought were interesting to them. And so she engaged them in a way that I personally had never done, because the most recent time I've really run this group, aside from teaching her how to do it and teaching my other staff, was when we were in forensics. And in forensics, people don't carry around the pens. They don't carry around the markers. They sit in a circle and we talk, and they walk into group, they sit down, they get up, they go back to their dorms, right? But this is a very good way to engage them in the moment. And I think it's really important to talk about that. So we're going to talk about character development. If we're talking bibliotherapy, if we're talking cinema therapy, right? Has the person grown? Can people change, right? These are our topics that we want them to start thinking about. Can the participants relate to what the characters are experiencing? How did they react if they had this instant happen? And now, knowing more about themselves and knowing more about who they are, would they change how they reacted now? And a lot of times we can bring in, if you've ever studied DBT talks about, you have your emotional mind and you have your emotional brain and your logical brain, and then together, when they come together, you have your wise mind. And your wise mind tells you that no matter what, if this situation happened over and over again, that person would do the exact same thing at the exact same time, right? And that's when we know, and we're working with our wise mind, that's when we know we are sure of our responses, and we are sure that this right here is the exact way I would handle it every single time. But most of us don't have that, right? Most of us wish that we could go back and we could change what we said or change how we reacted, change our facial expression, whatever it is. I mean, that's what life is, right? Sometimes we react, sometimes we listen, sometimes we take the 5-second pause, and sometimes we don't, okay? And so figuring that out and sharing that with your patients, that even you are human and sometimes you don't have the best reactions, that too is really important. So we're always going to allow for questions, and we encourage, like we read here about, we're going to ask them to participate, right? And to participate equally, but we're never, ever going to force someone to participate or share if they don't want to. That takes away that therapeutic value. And that's not fair to the patient, and it's not fair to the other patients, and it's not fair to you, right? Our goal is to make this a therapeutic environment. And if we force our patients to talk about things that they're not ready to talk about, we have broken the therapeutic bond. And that is absolutely not okay when we're talking about, especially when we're talking about traumatic events. Okay, so let's talk about how to conduct age-appropriate interventions. Because I know that, I believe Matthew said that he works in a residential treatment facility for youth. So there's a different approach that we're going to take when we're working with youth versus when we're working with adults. So for a child, we're going to limit their exposure, okay? We're not going to sit there and we're not going to have them see really traumatic, scenes from a movie or a TV show. We're going to find out what they know. We're going to do some exploration, and we're really going to try and help them to figure out what do they know and what can they understand, and we're going to phrase it in sentences that they can get. So we're going to break it down into simplest terms, right? Like I remember when I was working in youth psych before in the very beginning of my career, we were talking about 9/11, and back then it was only 10 years since 9/11. So a lot of these kids that we were working with were very, very young or not even born when this happened. And so, talking to them about the trauma of the day, we had to break it down into really simple terms, because you don't want to over trauma, the trauma, if you will. And you don't want to expose the child to something that will eventually be traumatic for them by your hand. We're going to validate their feelings, because everybody is entitled to our own feelings. And this kind of goes to adults too, right? You are allowed to feel angry. You are allowed to feel sad. You are allowed to feel happy, whatever it is. What we're not allowed to do is act out in anger against somebody else, right? I can feel angry, but I can't punch you in the face because I'm angry, right? And this is where we kind of break it down with those simple terms. We're going to create a safe space for discussion. We're going to let them know, this right here we are in our safe space, and here's what's going to happen. We are going to talk about this, and what we share in this group is among us. This is not for us to use when we're having, an argument later tonight, or this is not to throw in somebody's face. What we talk about here stays here unless it is something that is a danger to yourself or to others. And I always let my kiddos know that whatever we talk about, for the most part, can be kept between us. However, if it is something that is really, really life-shattering, if it is something that they are telling me that needs to be discussed with my team, I will let them know right away, but I will ask them. I'm going to say something like, if it's okay with you, I'm going to let, your therapist know what we just talked about. And then I'm going to reflect back what we said so that I can make sure that I can convey to my colleagues what the child is talking about and what they shared, so that it can be processed across the board with their team. Okay. So we're going to find out what they know. Like I said, with 9/11, it could have been that they were just, they knew that planes hit the buildings, right? But they might not have seen some of the images that those of us who are old enough to remember have seen, right? And so we don't want to, like I said, over traumatize them, if you will. We want to talk about it, but we want to give them in those simple terms exactly what they need to know in the moment. We can address their curiosity for sure, because let's be honest here. Curiosity is what makes us want to learn more and learn about how to address what is going on in our lives. So we're going to provide context and perspective, right? We're going to say, okay, so now we know that 9/11 happened, and we know it happened now coming up on 20 years, right? And so we can provide the context and say, well, this is what happened. And here is the perspective of X, Y, and Z, but we're moving forward. And this is how we're moving forward, right? We always want to kind of phrase it in a positive manner. So then we get to our teenagers and our adults. And again, all of this you see above, plus more, okay? So with our teens and our adults, we're gonna encourage the open dialogue. And again, we would do that with children too, but with our teens and our adults, we're going to go a little bit deeper. We're going to give them, I guess, more of the benefit of the doubt in the fact that this is something that they can probably handle a little more, right? We're going to admit when we don't know something, because the worst thing you can do is pretend like you know something and then they call you on it. And then again, your whole therapeutic bond out the window. There it goes, because they're not going to respect you or trust that you're going to be honest with them, right? So a simple phrase of, I'm not really sure of the answer to that, but let me look it up and let me get it back to you. I'm pretty sure every person who's in this little Zoom room right now, all four of you, right? All four of you have said this sentence probably when a surveyor comes, right? We know that we don't want to have that verbal diarrhea. We want to give them simple, concise answers, right? And so when a surveyor says, can you tell me about blah? And you say, well, I don't know about that one. But what you say out loud is, you know, I'm not sure of the correct answer, but let me get it for you and I'll come right back to you. And then you do, right? So it's the same thing with our teens and our adults. We're really going to make sure we let them know what the answer is. We're going to want to ask open-ended questions. These are really important because we don't want that yes, no. We want the dialogue, right? We want more. We're going to say things like, so tell me about that. What does that look like, right? Or tell me about blah, right? And the more we tell them, then we ask those clarifying questions, the more the other people in the room can probably relate and want to contribute to the conversation as well. I'm pretty sure you guys know this already, but I need to make sure that we kind of put this on paper. So overall, our goal is to engage our participants to consider the solutions to whatever the issue is that's being discussed. And that goes across the board. But again, with children, it's going to be a little simpler. With teenagers and adults, it's really going to be something that we're asking them to evaluate themselves and to really and truly engage in their treatment. Again, the whole idea is to get them with that trauma-informed care, is to engage in their treatment, which is exactly what we want as recreation therapists. So let's delve deeper. We're going to talk about different modalities and how we can utilize them and how we can edit them or change them based on our populations. So I wanted just a couple of caveats before we even go forward. Remember, you can cover these topics, but you have to make sure it's treatment appropriate. You have to make sure that you feel comfortable enough with your clinical skills so that you can explore the emotions behind it, because we can't open up a suitcase if we're not prepared to help the participants unpack the contents. And by that, I mean, we've been talking a lot about that very recently. I've heard that expression, well, that's a lot to unpack. And it really is, right? Think about, again, that brain is that filing cabinet. And think about all of the different things that we carry around with us, that baggage, as they call it. The emotional baggage. And if we're just carrying it around in our suitcase on our backs, right? And then I ask you to open up the suitcase and I go, oh, look at that, the time, gotta go. Well, guess what? I've just opened your gash, right? I pulled off the Band-Aid and then I left you with an open wound. Bye-bye, have fun storming the castle, right? That's not fair to them. It's not fair to the staff that are going to be working with them after you send them on their merry way, right? And it's not fair to the other clients. It's not fair to you, okay? So you have to be sure that you can assist them and that you're comfortable enough to explore these emotions. So first, we're going to identify what's quote unquote appropriate based on their age, their gender, their sexuality, their trauma history, right? There have been times where I have given, people trigger warnings, right? When I was doing a self-awareness through cinema group, and we watched this movie called Call Me Crazy, which was it's 5 different vignettes. It's small little movies within movies, right? And if you've never seen it, I highly recommend that you go ahead and you watch that. Okay. Hi Kathy, thank you for joining us. So Call Me Crazy. It's this wonderful movie. They talk about schizophrenia, they show bipolar disorder, they show depression, they show sexual trauma and PTSD. And so when I was showing this, I made sure that I let everybody know in advance that we're not going to view the actual scene. Okay, so Donna's asking what movie. It's called Call Me Crazy, and it was released by HBO, I believe. It's a 5 little vignette movie, right? So it's a movie of different scenes within the movie. So like I said, one of them is based on a young woman's experience with schizophrenia. One of them is based on a young woman's experience with her mother who is bipolar and how her experience is with that. One of them is about a man who is going through a severe depression, and he's a comedian. So he's got a smile when he's up there, and then in his real life, he's really, really upset. Okay, so like I said, the last vignette is about sexual trauma and PTSD. And so, like I said, what I would do is I would let them know that, okay, so we're going to fast forward through the actual flashback of that, because there's no need. You understand what's happening. We're not going to glorify it, especially considering that I worked in forensic psych and I did have patients who absolutely love to relive the traumas or the offenses that they had engaged in. Okay, and some of them, in fact, were sexual assault. So, so who's asking me? I think Donna is asking me about if you can get it on YouTube or Fire Stick. To be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure. I know that you could probably, I know we ordered it and we had it at our facility, but I would tell you to look it up. I'm sure you can get it on Amazon. I just don't know if you can download it to a Fire Stick. So regardless, okay, what we're going to talk about, right? We're going to identify what's appropriate. And again, we're going to give those trigger warnings, okay? Because remember, trauma doesn't only apply to our younger population, right? If we are, talking about, like, if we're watching something of war, right? And you have either Vietnam vets, or you have World War II vets, right? Or Korean War, right? Or even Desert Storm, or even currently, right? We have to make sure that we are not, again, ripping off that Band-Aid and going, bye-bye, okay? So, again, that 75-year-old veteran who might have experienced untreated trauma in combat. And now here you are, which you didn't watch your movie, or you didn't look at the song, or listen to, or read the book. And now here you are, and you've just opened up that gash without knowing, okay? So we're going to avoid glorifying our behaviors if they're going to do more harm than good, meaning self-harm or suicide, abuse, drug or alcohol abuse, where there's no lesson, quote unquote, to be learned. So when we were researching this this session, I was looking up a lot of different things that we could kind of view. And the reason why Megan and I even came up with this topic at all, and I'm going to stop the share for a second because I kind of want to talk to you guys for a second, okay? So the reason why we came up with this topic was specifically because we had talked about how her kiddos at Queen's Children we're all watching this new show on Netflix called 13 Reasons Why. And if you haven't heard about it, okay, I'm going to let you know it's a very, very, very triggering television show. It's based on a book about a young girl, Hannah, who, and I'm not going to spoil it for you because it's the first season, the first episode, she winds up committing suicide. And the first 13 episodes of the show are about the 13 reasons why, or people why, she wound up killing herself. Okay. And so basically, Megan and I were talking about how she had to watch this series specifically so she could help her kiddos deal with the trauma of having watched this series. And so when I was looking for clips to bring into this actual activity and this session, I was originally going to bring in some of the 13 Reasons Why clips. And everything I researched was talking about how 13 Reasons Why could be a really great show, but it doesn't really help the people that are watching it, because in the beginning it didn't have a trigger warning. In the beginning it didn't have a PSA where it was, if you're feeling this way, here are some resources for you. And they were saying that it could actually have led to an increase in suicidal ideations and attempts. So that being said, Megan and I specifically chose not to use scenes from that series. However, if that is something that you feel as though that would be a good thing for your clients to view, like I said, you must view what you're going to be showing them. Okay. And we're not going to show them things that are glorifying it, right? We're not going to show them underage kids drinking if there's no consequences at the end of that, because obviously we don't want them to be glorified. Okay. We need to be prepared to deal with the effect that these scenes can have on our participants. And again, we cannot rip open that gash and put the little teensy tiny Band-Aid on it and then send them on their way. It is absolutely against everything that we stand for as therapists, right? And honestly, it's really selfish of us to do that. So if you don't have the time to sit with your patients afterwards, if you're going to do something like this, don't bother doing it. Find something that is less triggering and less traumatic. So let's talk about cinema therapy, okay? So we can do it in movies or we can do it with TV shows. And so the rec therapist you must watch them before, because you need to know what potentially is triggering, and you need to let them know of the general idea so that they can get the opting out of attending the group, okay? And I'm going to tell you a little story. I'll tell you. So when I worked at Mid-Hudson, I was doing self-awareness for cinema 3 times a week. And so we'd ordered a lot of different movies, different TV shows, all that kind of stuff. And I remember one of my coworkers, she had lent me this movie that I didn't get a chance to watch, but I valued her clinical judgment. And so I started showing it, and it was great. It was wonderful. I'm watching with my patients. Everything's great. Leave it in the DVD player, because the next week we're going to come back. We're going to watch it. I'm going to leave it. I come back and it's gone. And I rush into my boss's office and I say, oh my gosh, do you know where the DVD is? And she goes, what DVD? I said, the DVD of the movie I was showing the patient. She goes, well, what is it? And I said, it's called Mr. Jones. So backflash. Mr. Jones is a fabulous movie that shows signs and symptoms of bipolar disorder. It really and truly, it absolutely shows the mania. It shows the depression, all of that. But what does she say to me? She says, now excuse my language. She says, you mean the one where he screws his psychiatrist? And I said, wait, what? She said, yeah, did you not watch the movie? I said, well, I was watching it up to a certain point, and then we wound up ending the group. She goes, yeah, you can't show them that because that's not appropriate. regardless of how great Richard Gere was in that movie and how wonderfully he showed the signs and symptoms of bipolar disorder, I can't very well glorify the fact that here he is sleeping with his psychiatrist, right? So again, learn from my mistake and always, always, always check your stuff. So you have to have discussion questions prepared so that you can make the discussions into a learning piece. This is not Friday night at the movies. And I always tell my students this, and I tell my patients this too. When we're doing self-awareness through cinema, we're doing this as a therapeutic intervention, okay? The movie is the conduit to the discussion, but the discussion is the actual group. And when I'm doing a self-awareness through cinema, usually a 2.5 hour movie takes me about 6 to 7 weeks to actually display and actually get through the ending of it. Where, like I said in the previous slide, every 5 to 10 minutes, you should be stopping it and you should be having a good 20-minute discussion based on what they just viewed, which is why those discussion questions are absolutely necessary, because you can totally get off track, but if you have that outline ready, you can, again, reel it back in and bring it back to what you're looking for. So in this, I have embedded links. However, because YouTube is YouTube, what I did was I went ahead and I actually already preloaded them into my, where is it? Sorry, everybody, looking for my, hold on one moment. Show all windows, there we go, okay. I do apologize. This doesn't usually happen. Hold on just a moment. Okay, let me just see. There it is. Okay. Now. Okay, let's try and do it this way. Share our screen this way. And I really do apologize. Here it is. Okay. So I'm going to show you guys a couple of different clips, and we're going to talk about how we would actually do this. So this is really and truly where I want you guys, once we finish watching the scene, what I want to do is have an actual discussion, okay? So I'm going to open it up to a big screen. You guys let me know if you cannot hear it. If you cannot hear it, please, please, please turn on your mic rather, and let me know, okay? So this is from Good Will Hunting.
What is that?
This is your file. I have to send it back to the judge for evaluation.
Oh. Hey, you're not gonna fail me, are you? What's it say?
Want to read it?
Why? Have you had any experience with that?
20 years of counseling. Yeah, I've seen some pretty awful shit.
I mean, have you had any experience with that?
Personally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have.
Sure ain't good.
My father was an alcoholic. Mean fucking drunk. He'd come home hammered, looking to wail on somebody. So I'd provoke him so he wouldn't go after my mother and little brother. Interesting nights were when he wore his rings.
He used to just put a wrench, a stick, and a belt on the table and just say choose.
Well, I gotta go with the belt there, Vanna.
I used to go with the wrench.
Why the wrench?
Because fuck him, that's why.
Your foster father.
Yeah. So, you know, what is it, like, Will has an attachment disorder? Is it all that stuff? Fear of abandonment? Is that why I broke up with Skylar?
I didn't know you had.
Yeah, I did.
You want to talk about it?
No.
Hey, Will. I don't know a lot. You see this? All this shit. This is not your fault.
Watch his facial expressions.
Look at me, son. It's not your fault.
I know.
Watch his
It's
body
not
language.
your fault.
I know.
No, you don't. It's not your fault.
I know.
It's not your fault.
All right.
It's not your fault. It's not your fault. Don't fuck with me. It's not your fault.
Don't fuck with me, all right? Don't fuck with me, Sean. Not you.
It's not your fault. It's not your fault.
Oh my God. Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Okay, so I'm going to stop the share here now. So, what did you guys think? What did you notice?
It was a powerful scene.
Right?
Yeah,
Super
yeah.
powerful.
Yeah. It's almost like he was coming to terms with, you know, whether or not it was his fault. I mean, it seems like Robin Williams was trying to convince him of it.
Right. Why do you think he needed convincing, though? Because, so if you guys have never seen Good Will Hunting, and I apologize for not giving you a trigger warning on the cursing, I kind of forgot about that part. But think about this, right? If you've never seen Good Will Hunting, which, by the way, I highly recommend, but the whole idea is that Matt Damon, who is Will Hunting, he is a brilliant man who comes from the slums of Boston. He winds up basically being forced into working with these mathematicians because he gets into one too many fights. And instead of going to prison or jail, the university that he worked at worked out this deal, right? Where he would literally have to go through therapy and he would have to go through like basically like teaching math classes because he's that brilliant. And so he winds up with Robin Williams as his therapist, and he does everything he can to alienate Robin Williams' character. So they finally get to the point where they have that therapeutic bond. Why do you think he said to him, "It's not your fault"?
Because it was the result of a trauma. Yeah, it was the result of a trauma.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. And a lot of times, especially trauma that happens when we are children. Donna says often those who are abused blame themselves. And that's exactly where I was going with that. Perfect, Donna. Thank you. That's exactly right. And so a lot of times, as people grow up, after they've had these traumatic events happen, they wind up putting the blame on themselves. Well, if I would have done this, well, if I should have done that, blah, 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 right? But it isn't their fault. And it isn't something that they could have changed or helped or done anything different, right? And when he said he used to put the wrench and the this and the that on the table and say pick, basically that was his way of maintaining the trauma in his own hands, okay? So let's go on back to our slideshow, okay? And so I want you guys to think about this. What age group would you show this to? I'm sorry, give me one moment. I do apologize. Okay, I do apologize. I just want to share with you guys for a second. Give me a second. I'm going to stop the share. So the reason why I'm here in this house is because I actually came to my mother's house so that I could facilitate this without kind of interrupting my husband. So my mother's landlord just knocked on the door. So I do apologize. I promise you that doesn't normally happen. But okay. So Donna wrote, if I was better, if I wasn't so bad, he wouldn't do it to me. And that's absolutely correct. So let's talk for a second. What age group would you show this to? What do you think? Would it be adults? Would it be kids? Would it like, who shouldn't see it?
I would say mostly for adults.
Okay. So mostly for adults.
Teenagers potentially too. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anybody else have any other thoughts, any of the differences, or would you all agree that it probably, I wouldn't show this to a 5-year-old, that's for sure. Firstly, the cursing in and of itself, very much not okay. Aside from that, you know, we definitely want to make sure that, okay. So Matthew says adults, maybe some teens, but not children for certain. Absolutely, right? And again, you have to, the biggest thing, you have to know your patients, right? You have to know who can handle this kind of stuff and who you're going to say, maybe this isn't right for you. So maybe you skip this one, okay? Again, it's all about knowing our therapeutic relationship with our patients and making sure that we are doing best practice for them. So what kind of discussions would we have for this scene, right? I want to ask you guys, what would you talk about? What topics do you think would be pertinent when we talk about this scene? Come on, guys, shout them out. Unmute yourself and shout them out.
Well, kind of like the impact that trauma has on us, starting as kids all the way through adulthood.
Right. So the different impacts, right? So kind of like what we just talked about last session, right? Where it's, you know, the physiological, the social, all of the different effects that trauma has on our lives, right? That fight or flight. And then how those character traits, you know, they develop over time because of our fight or flight response. These are all things that we don't really think about. Donna's saying, would you ask, how did watching them make you feel? Absolutely, 100%. Because sometimes that could be something that they don't really understand what they're feeling, right? What is your body telling you? Are you tensing up? Are you clenching your hands? Are you mad? Are you sad, right? Again, remember that anger iceberg, that emotion iceberg, what we're seeing on the surface versus what we're feeling below. And sometimes even adults, we can't understand how to verbalize our emotions with our words, but we can see how our body is reacting, right? We can literally feel our muscles tensing up. We can literally feel like something is happening. This is our body's response to stress, okay? And so we could be talking about the fact that Will is so smart that he understands what attachment, you know, disorder is, and identifying what the actual signs and symptoms of attachment disorder are, right? He could talk about how he was defiant in the idea that, well, I would always choose the wrench. Well, why? Because F him, that's why, right? What kind of person would be like, you know what, give me the worst of them all? Instead of saying, well, the belt would be probably the easiest. No, because screw him, why not? See what I'm saying? These are kind of discussions, right? And then we would ask our patients, well, what about you, right? How would you handle it if this happened? What about the uncomfortableness, right? Remember how I was saying, I hope you guys could hear me when I was kind of talking over the movie where I said, watch his body language, right? Because Will started out opened chest, right? And he was smiling. And then as he kept saying it to him, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. What happened? He literally went with a smile to a frown, to a tear, to not even knowing how to deal with his emotions. So he pushed him away, right? That is the most literal physical description of our fight or flight response that I've probably ever seen when we're not even realizing it's that fight or flight, right? He pushed him away because if I put the wall up, you can't hurt me. And he said, not you, Sean, not you, right? These are the things we want to talk about and touch on. Why not him? Because if he's looking at him as a father figure, or he's looking at him as the one person he can really trust in the world, and then he's making him address this trauma, why not him? Why not? Right? So these are what we're going to talk about, right? We're going to get into it. We're not going to shy away. When we're talking about things that are really heavy and harder to talk about, sometimes they need that push, just like Sean did. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. And he said, no, not you, Sean, not you. It's not your fault, right? Because he had to keep hearing that. And that is the most important thing of them all. Okay, so let's go on back to our slideshow because we've got a lot more to go. We've only got 40 minutes left. Okay.
Sure. Well, I mean, I also feel like, if you hear something enough, and even I facilitated, facilitating many groups like that. If you say something enough, you start to internalize it. You start to believe it. So, yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Dan, 100%. And that's the thing, especially with victim of trauma, right? Remember that first slide that I showed? I'm gonna pull it up on my phone because I had saved it. Okay, so your trauma is valid even if there are others who have it worse. If it occurred a long time ago, if you feel, quote, just fine now, if it, quote, could have been avoided, if only you know about it. And if someone says, quote, it isn't that big of a deal. We internalize that. And this is where the problem lies. Because we take it in and say, well, my trauma is not important. But remember from last session, trauma is perception. What I perceive as traumatic to me, you might not perceive it as traumatic to you, but that's because maybe we were raised in different households. Maybe we have a different resiliency. Whatever the case is, we each experience our own experiences differently. Okay, so let's go on back. But that's a really great point. Thanks, Dan, for saying that. Okay, so bibliotherapy. So bibliotherapy is when we read a story, a book, or a poem, okay? So we're gonna ask probing questions that can be used to promote the discussion and the depth of exploration. How is this character situation similar or different than your own? What do you see about this person in yourself and how are you different? What's the most significant event that ever happened to this character? And again, can they relate? When we create our own stuff, right? When we're journaling, when we're poetry, when we're doing all that, catharsis can occur. And we know what catharsis is, that feeling, right? Even if it looks like it's a super heavy topic, this is where our healing begins, right? This is where when we unpack that suitcase and we help them deal with the trauma through these modalities. Remember, the recreation activities are the conduit to the discussion, and that's the recreation therapy. So we've got poetry, we've got journaling, we've got creative writing or short stories, free association where we identify a word and then your participants write based on what comes to mind from that one word. So I want to show you guys a poem that was written by somebody that has experienced trauma. Let's read it. It says, the trauma said, do not write this poem. No one wants to hear you cry about the grief inside your bones. If it's endurable, then endure it. Stop complaining. Yet my bones said, write the poem. Some nights at 2 a.m., I wonder, where will I be in 5, 10, 15 years? Other nights at 2 a.m., I wonder if I will even make it that far. I do hope when I die, before my soul leaves my body, it spends a little time just floating through the blood and water inside me, just to enjoy the peace and serenity, to be able to turn and stretch. For my soul was caged from such an early age, ripped into pieces, yet expected to remain sane. My skin, my heart, my brain, all stripped of their voices and turned into pain. What do you guys think about that? When I first read this poem, I was floored by the vulnerability and the willingness for the writer to really and truly open up about these emotions. And for me, it was an eye opener so that this person felt as though in this moment in time, this was their emotion, right? But what's the message? What do you guys think the message is about this poem? Is this a call for help? Is this like a suicide note, or is this a battle cry to keep going? What do you think?
I think it's open to interpretation. I mean, it's a very deep subject about life and death.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. It is absolutely interpretation. That's exactly what we do, right? I mean, every person can read it and have a different interpretation. So Donna's saying it's facing their thoughts and trauma. And I completely agree. And the thing is, like we talked about, everybody's trauma is experienced differently, and everybody's way of dealing with the trauma is experienced differently. And for this person, the way to write this out was a catharsis for them. And I think this was really brave of the person, not only to write it, but also to share it. Because for me, this gave me a little bit of insight to see, right? And, this person had expressed suicidality before. But when I read that, I said, I wonder if I would even make it that far. I do hope when I die, before my soul leaves my body, it spends a little time just floating through the blood and water inside me, just to enjoy the peace and serenity, to be able in turn and stretch, for my soul was caged at such an early age. For me, that showed me hope. It didn't show me a suicidality. It showed me that this person is yearning for the peace that they're so very much craving. But this, for me, this said to me that this person, even they're thinking about the 5, 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
That showed me that there's hope for the future. Matthew was saying willingness in the mind of the person, that they wish to be free of the trauma that the person feels all the time, and no longer to feel the trauma and to float and feel the weight of all that trauma that they're feeling fall away. The wish to be free. And I think you nailed that right on the head, Matthew. I really do. And I think that, the fact that this person was willing to share this yearning for that freedom, again, for me, it showed me that that person has hope for themselves, that one day they will be free of the trauma. Just a thought. So let's talk about music as a therapy. So again, we have to know our audience, we have to know our music, we have to know our topics of discussion. We have to have our discussion questions ready. Are you guys seeing a theme here? Because I hope that you are. We're going to ask about their initial thoughts on the song. And always, whenever I'm teaching this kind of group, I always let them know before I play any music at all. I'm going to let you guys know right now, I didn't write the songs and I didn't sing the song. So if you don't like the song, it is totally okay. What I'm going to tell you is I'm going to ask you to listen to the songs. I'm going to ask you to look at the lyrics, and I'm going to ask you to tell me if you feel as though you can relate to the words. Because again, remember, a song is just a poem to music. So you can even tie this in with your bibliotherapy. We're going to say who liked it, who hated it. We're going to ask her to raise their hands, right? Because that's how we're going to see who we're going to engage in our discussions. How did your body react to it? And when we're about to play the song, I ask them to think about this, right? As you listen to this song, tell me, does your body tense up? Does it loosen up? Do your hands clench? Does your jaw clench? Does your heart rate go faster? Does your flight or fight kick in, right? So you see these questions. Do we have a memory attached to it? Or did the lyrics bring up a memory? So then we're going to talk about, let's look at the lyrics, right? We're going to, beforehand, you're going to identify 3 to 4 discussion pieces that we're going to use as lessons. And sometimes you can have a whole entire theme going. Remember last time I talked about how I had this whole discussion on anger, yay! I found that when you do one specific type of emotion, it can backfire. So what I try to do instead is use different genres to discuss a common theme. Like, fear, but it's not just fear of, actual fear. It could be fear of losing a loved one. It could be fear of starting over. It could be a fear of physical health, whatever it is. And then finding songs that go into my theme. Usually when it's New Year's coming up, I'll do a New Year, New Me, or a goal setting. And we talk about that through music, okay? So we're going to ask them to identify what they really think the emotion of the song is. Is it angry, hurt, sad, happy, or what have you? Can they relate to the lyrics? We're going to follow up asking, what would you do or have done in a situation that was similar? And finally, we're going to say, what's the message of this song? Is it anger? Is it this? Is that? And again, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just opinions. So let's see it in action. Okay, and again, I'm going to stop my share here so that we can go to the already prepped spot. Okay, Kathy says that this makes her think of Governor Cuomo's comments in the news regarding the allegation against them. So she feels empathy for the alleged victims. Okay, and Cats in the Cradle, that's a great song. You're absolutely right. So that's something we can definitely look into to use that lyric, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to escape out of. Okay, hold on. Escape full screen, just kidding. There we go. Sorry, guys. Okay, so we are going to watch this music video. Now, sometimes I will do this with a music video. Sometimes I will do it with the lyrics. Sometimes I will do it just kind of, winging it, okay? So this one, we're going to watch. So, what do we think? Initial thoughts. Raise of hands. You can click the little button below. How many like the song?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's my favorite, but
okay. But like I said, I didn't write it, I didn't sing it, so it's okay. So Matthew was giving a thumbs up. He liked it. How about you, Linda, Donna, Fiona, Kathy? We have a thumbs up, a thumbs down.
I could see how it could be used, of course. Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna talk more about that, Dan. But first, we're gonna talk about our initial thoughts. So Donna's giving a thumbs up. Linda or Kathy or Fiona? Anybody have any? Aha. Okay, Kathy says she liked it. Good. Okay. So let's go back to our screen share and let's take a look. Okay, so Fiona says it's okay. And again, that's okay too. Not everybody's gonna like the songs, not everybody's able to relate to it, and that's okay. So let's look at the lyrics. I would hold you in my arms. I would take the pain away. I would thank you for all you've done, forgive all your mistakes. There's nothing I wouldn't do to hear your voice again. Sometimes I want to call you, but I know you won't be there. So let me ask you this. Who is she talking to?
Somebody she lost.
Okay, so somebody she lost. Could it be a parent? Could it be a sibling? Could it be a friend? It could be anybody, right?
Mm.
In the music video, we saw that it seemed as though it was her father, right? I'm
Yeah.
seeing that here, okay? So our chat says, okay, so Donna says it looked like her father, okay? So the next question I always ask for this is if you can relate and you'd like to share, who would this lyric be reminding you of? Who would you be talking to when you would say, I would hold you in my arms, I would take your pain away, thank you for all you've done, forgive all your mistakes. There's nothing I wouldn't do to hear your voice again. And sometimes I want to call you, but I know you won't be there. So these are the kinds of questions we're going to ask in this kind of session, okay? We're also going to ask, is there a relationship that you wish would have ended differently? Are there regrets that you have that you feel like you can never rectify? Maybe the relationship is permanently damaged. Maybe the person passed away, right? So I'm going to tell you a little bit of story about this song. This song was written by a singer. She's not Christina Aguilera, but Linda, oh gosh, I can't remember her last name. She's a big producer now, and she wrote this song because she actually lost her father, and they had not spoken before he had passed away. And so when I first heard this song, I was like, wow, that's pretty darn deep. And I thought that it was actually Christina Aguilera who wrote it because if you know anything about her, she also had a pretty intensely traumatizing childhood at the hands of her father, having physical abuse towards her and her mother. But so here's my thing though, right? If they both feel that way, can we imagine that other people feel that way too? Right? It does not have to be a parent that has this kind of hold on us or their relationship has this kind of sadness to it, right? Let's take this. Some days I feel broke inside, but I won't admit. Sometimes I just want to hide because it's you I miss. You know, it's just so hard to say goodbye when it comes to this. And my question is, comes to what? What is this? Is it her pride? Is it her anger at not having made amends? What do you think? Come on, guys, shout out there. Come on.
I'm guessing the loss, basically.
Okay.
When it comes to the loss, yeah. Yeah. And
So,
of course, the pain on her face did grow.
yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
When
yeah.
she was happy and then she received the note that, what we're assuming is that the note said your father passed away. Okay. And now here she is, she's reliving, right? And the reason why she's a circus actress, the reason why she's so involved in all of this stuff is because her father took her to the circus all those years ago. And now she's having all these flashbacks of the reason why she is who she is because of him. But because they had a tumultuous relationship, they did not have each other in their lives. So is it pride that stopped her from reaching out to him? Is it anger? Is it sadness? Again, we don't know the answer, but we're assuming that it was probably pride, right? Again, it's all a matter of how are we relating this to our patients? You're right, Fiona, it could be all in one, right? There's a lot of emotions that come through when we're talking about these kinds of feelings. We don't always just have that one true emotion, right? We talked about that emotion iceberg. The behavior is the top, but underneath there's like 10 different emotions that are going into the behavior. And this is why it is so important to help our patients to work through this. And again, I've shown this and I've talked about these kinds of things and I've done this kind of group in every population I've worked with. okay? I have done this in geriatrics in a skilled nursing facility. I have done this in youth psych and adult psych. I've done this with my special needs kiddos, okay? There's a way to do it. We just have to know our audience and we have to know what's going to help them best, okay? So again, is the situation that caused this loss of relationship? Is it her inability to apologize for what she might have done in the relationship to end it? That's the biggest thing, right? We talk a lot about pride, and pride is that biggest bitter pill that we have to swallow, right? And a lot of times we have such regrets because of it. And I'm going to tell you guys, I'm going to stop the share and I'll share with you guys a personal moment. So very recently, last year, before the pandemic, obviously, my cousin got married, and my father was the youngest of three brothers, and he was an oopsie daisy. So his older brother, his second older brother, was 11 years older than him, and his oldest brother was 14 years older than him. So my cousins are a lot older than myself and my sister. And so my father and his brother had a falling out 50 years ago at this point, okay? And they didn't speak. And my father passed away and they still had not spoken. And so my cousin, the youngest child of the brother that had wound up, they didn't speak, he fostered a relationship with us, and we've had a relationship with him for years. My father really adored him. And so he invited us to the wedding, even though my uncle was going to be there. The man I'd never met in a day in my life. My sister had never met him. My mother had not seen him in over 50 years. And so we went to the wedding, and, you know, my mother and my uncle, they talked for the first time. And the first thing that my uncle said was, "I'm so sorry that I did not reach out sooner." And so I'm sharing this with you because we have regrets that we live with in our lives, right? And sometimes we take them to the grave with us, and sometimes if we're smart enough and we are really in tune with ourselves and we're really willing to put ourselves out there, we're willing to push it through. And so, you know, I'm pretty confident that had my uncle reached out to my father, it would have been a very different situation. So is it about death? Is it about pride? Can it be interpreted in different ways? Absolutely, because it depends on your experiences and the issues that you're working through. And this is why it's so important to talk about. And again, remember we talked about those individual things. What is the message of this song? What emotions would you use the song for? Is it anger, sadness, regret, loss, grief, forgiveness, moving forward? All of the above, or maybe it's specific, right? Remember, if we're going to do themes, you're going to want to have multiple genres and you're going to have multiple versions, right? So this might be about forgiveness or lack thereof. And then you might have another song that absolutely works with forgiveness, right? So take a look here. There are some sample songs that talk about issues for discussion, right? And we're not going to go all over this because, again, I'm going to send this out. And also, since you guys have all given me your emails, I'm not only going to send you this, but I'm going to send you, when I presented on the use of music, contemporary music as a treatment modality, I compiled a bunch of different lists, sample songs that talk about anger, sadness, grief, all of that. I'll send that along with you guys so that you have just a sample. And again, this is very much a sample. This is not the end all be all. This is also a couple of years old, so you absolutely can and should add to it, okay? But it's a jumping ground. So, art as a therapeutic intervention. Our aim is to manage behaviors, process feelings, reduce stress, anxiety, and increase self-esteem through the use of creative art expression. We have self-discovery, which is creating art to help our clients acknowledge and recognize their feelings that have been lurking in their subconscious or display the emotions that they could not verbalize. We also want to give them the catharsis, that emotional release. So take a look. This is actually work that my kiddos have drawn, okay? And I absolutely loved both of these. They're different kids, they're different times, they were taken over different periods of time. But take a look here. Your brain didn't fail you, it just found 1,000 ways that it won't work. Or I cried for days, I drank, I smoked, I self-harmed. It was my fault. I think I showed her only love, but she still hurt me. Now, mind you, I did cut off the end because it did have the child's name on there, and obviously for HIPAA reasons, we are obviously I'm not going to share that. But take a look at how powerful these two pieces of art were. So, oh boy, that didn't pop up right. But so we're going to talk about now emotions of grief through recreation therapy. Okay. So remember, grief can occur after any change that alters our life, not just death, loss of health, autonomy, relationships, employment, familial ties, supports, even our global pandemic. Now, remember, we were going to do this session last year, but it would really, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about this as well, because we've all grieved. We've lost people, we've lost jobs, we've lost our sanity at some points, right? But does everyone go through the stages the same way? Not really, right? So how do we address these topics? So I'm gonna stop our share here. And we're going to watch one of the two scenes that I had set for us. Okay, because of time, I want to kind of get through. So, there we go. Let's do stepmom. Okay. So if you've never seen it,
that's yours.
Susan Sarandon is going to pass away. And she's created gifts for her children.
Oh, wow. It's a quilt. Mm-hmm. And it has our pictures on it.
Here, put it here. It's kind of like a scrapbook you can keep warm with.
It's so beautiful. I've never seen anything like it.
See your horse here and your medals that you got. And you remember this? That was that dress you wouldn't take off in pre-K for about 3 weeks. You remember that?
Yeah.
Your first step. Look at your foot. Look at that little chubby cheek thing. Look at you.
Are you scared?
Little. Mostly I was scared for you, but I'm not anymore because I know you're going to be okay.
I don't want to say goodbye. I'm going to miss you so much.
Oh, sweetie. Okay. Oh, sweetie. Oh, my sweetie. It's okay. It's okay to miss me. It's okay. You can miss me and you can take me with you. You can. I mean, when you're in trouble, have me there. And when you fall in love, have me there. You can. And that's how people go on forever, you know, because somebody takes them along. And your graduation and your wedding and when you have your babies. Take me along, will you?
Always, always, and always.
You have made my life so wonderful. Take that with you too, okay?
Okay, so for time's sake and, you know, our emotions, I'm going to pause it here. So again, we can talk about different emotions, different ways of grief, different, you know, viewpoints, right? The first clip that we're out of time for, but the first clip was about anger with grief, right? The second clip was about sadness through grief, as well as the future with grief, right? Everybody experiences it differently. So let's talk very quickly about emotions of societal grief through rec therapy, okay? Again, you can use any of the modalities that we've shown you, but you have to remember to tread lightly, and you have to be sure that you're not giving your own opinion outside of the normal, racism, sexism, other isms or bad types of statements, okay? It does not matter what your opinion is. It matters what theirs is. So you can be pro-police and still talk about racial unrest. You can be a member of a marginalized religion or culture and still talk about the, quote, other side. You can be a liberal, a conservative, or not even identify as anything at all. And still, you can talk about these types of issues because they affect your clients. But if you're going to talk about them, you have to do your research. You have to know what, quote unquote, both sides are saying, and you have to present it as neutral. Your opinion does not matter, okay? You can say something like, the blanks say, while they blank say, but what do you think, right? Because again, it's not a matter of what I think, it's a matter of what you feel. So remember, when we're facilitating these kinds of discussions, our ground rules must be followed with the addition of, everyone's entitled to our own opinion. You do not have to agree, but you do have to be respectful. Statements that intentionally seek to invalidate the experience of people who are seen as marginalized cannot and will not be tolerated. And I want to say this because as a white woman, I have no right to tell a person of color at all that they should not be upset if they feel that they experienced a racist interaction, even if it was with me. Because sometimes we might not realize when we commit a microaggression, but if someone tells us that they felt disrespected, I don't care what color, creed, nation, wherever you are, we have to listen, no matter how uncomfortable it makes us feel. And we have to try and learn and do better. It does not mean you're not going to fail again, because I'll tell you right now, there's plenty of times where I say something and somebody goes, really? And I didn't realize what I said was not the most kind and loving, okay? And again, it's a work in progress. So we have to be willing to work in progress. So through music, you have things like Injustice, right? You can analyze the lyrics. There are some songs, Remedy, it's a rap song about the Holocaust. Billie Holiday's Strange Fruit. Childish Gambino's This Is America. Cinema Therapy. This is a list of different places you can go right there. That's social justice filmography, right? It's a whole list of different things. Watching American History X, again, we have to make sure our patients are not going to be glorifying it, that they're not going to be triggered by it, and that it's appropriate for their age and everything else. Because American History X, I'm going to let you guys know if you've never seen it, can be very, very, very emotionally charged. So you have to watch it beforehand. Get Out even, right? Higher Learning. I'll never forget Higher Learning. I saw that when I was 15, and it literally affects every day of my life, the things that I do because of the things that I learned in that movie. Selma, Dances with Wolves, right? For people who are of Native American culture, that is probably one of the more true to form and true to life actual identifications of what people, indigenous people went through when we were having our manifest destiny. Crash, great movie. Dear White People, awesome series. Blackish and Mixedish, those are two series. And I want to show you guys very quickly. Hold on, let's go back here. I want to show you a quick scene from Blackish, because I have to tell you guys, I never really understood truly the nuances of a lot of things that a lot of my friends discuss until I started watching shows like this. So what we're talking about here is Diane, they were the whole idea is about it's colorist. Okay, so take a look here.
I've travelled all
just
over,
kidding.
telling
Sorry.
folks they could save by bundling home and car insurance.
I hate when that does it. I do apologize. We're just going to give it 2 seconds. We're almost there. And here.
Since when did you become dark skinned? I'm not dark, but I'm dark enough.
Not as dark as me.
Oh.
No one in this family is as dark as me. That's the problem.
That's not a problem. The fact that you're different is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
If it's so good, then why are you all so scared to talk about it? Like today, you're saying that it's about the camera lighting or complexion. No, it's about me being darker.
Well, it's a complicated issue, but Diane, all black skin is beautiful.
Yes.
Okay. So then why do people bleach their skin?
How many people do that?
It's like a $10 billion business.
Oh.
Diane, I had no idea that this hurt you so much.
How could it not? It's everywhere I look.
Oh, trust me. Women like us shouldn't wear red lipstick. Try this one.
It's everywhere I go.
Oh, look at you. You are gorgeous for a dark-skinned girl.
It's everyone I talk to.
Sweetheart.
You see? Now you feel bad for me.
Well,
No, this is why I didn't want to talk about it. I just don't want to be different.
So I think that that's a really, really important scene that personally, obviously, as a white woman, I never understood what it meant to hear my friends who are people of color talking about being a darker skin versus a lighter skin or having a yellow tone. And I never understood why it made a difference because it didn't affect me. And so this truly opened my eyes, and I hope that it did for those of you who are not people of color as well, to understand exactly, not even understand, just try and empathize what our country is experiencing and what we can do to help, okay? So again, there's bibliotherapy. This book just came out. It's called You Are Your Best Thing. And a friend of mine actually is an author within this book, and it's so fabulous. I highly recommend it. If you're talking about the Holocaust or anti-Semitism, we're talking about Mouse 1, Mouse 2. There is a list of the 12 best Latino books of 2020. There's books on transphobia and transgender issues. There's books on death, grief, and bereavement, emotional healing. Okay, take a look here very quickly. Samples of societal grief and art using recreation therapy programming. And the top two actually come from another facility. And I thought it was really interesting because for me, my kiddos, we don't usually talk that much about it, but I love the fact, this comes from Megan's facility, and I love the fact that her kiddos are focusing so much on this, that it inspired me to actually want to begin doing this kind of stuff with our kiddos as well. So I just want you guys to kind of, take a look here. Do we have any questions, any thoughts before we move forward and end the session? Donna says, I had someone say to me how someone who was lighter skinned than them was prejudiced against them because their skin was darker. And that's, again, I can never comment on somebody else's experience and on their perception of prejudice, on their perception of trauma, on their perception of what is upsetting to them, because unless I'm exactly in their shoes, who am I to tell them that they don't deserve to feel upset, right? So before we end, I would just love to get some final thoughts and hear from you guys. Is there anything that you think that we missed in this session that should or could be added to it, or things that we did not talk about that are important to be discussed? And if not, that's okay too. I just wanted to give everybody a chance to kind of, if you wanted to share, have at it. And if not, that's okay too. Again, I'm never going to force anybody to participate, and I'm never going to, you know, make somebody feel, hopefully, to make them feel uncomfortable. And if there's ever a time where you feel like you want to, you know, reach out individually, our emails will be put in. When I send this out to you, you'll have my email, and I'll put Megan's as well. I'm so sorry that she was unable to join us. The great thing about doing Zoom is that you could be sitting in your living rooms and doing this. The terrible thing about Zoom is that we have no control over technical difficulties, and you know, unfortunately, the last few days have been plagued with them. So we do apologize, and our goal is to make sure that we can really engage you guys. Yesterday, one of the sessions didn't tape, so we're going to wind up re-recording it tomorrow. So, you know, if you missed the session on compassion fatigue, it will be redone tomorrow evening. Mary has agreed to redo it. So if nobody has any questions or comments, I'm going to go ahead and end the session because it is 9:04. But if you have thoughts, if you have, you know, ideas, please feel free to reach out and let me know. And, you know, I hope that you're able to use what we taught you guys. Oh, thank you, Donna. I'm so glad you said that. Donna says this was awesome. So I hope that what you can do is take this, make it yours, okay? This was our version of how to do this. If you have other ways to do this, please, please, please share with us. That's what we do in this profession. Thank you so much. I'm glad that you thought it was wonderful. Great. I really hope that you learned from this, and I hope that you can take this back to your facility, to your populations, and really incorporate that trauma-informed care into your daily practice, and maybe advocate with your administration to try and do that no matter what population you work with. So I very much appreciate your time. Thank you for sitting with us on a Wednesday night until 9 o'clock. I do hope that you have a good rest of your evening and the rest of our conference. So thank you guys so much. I'm going to end now. Thank you. Be well.